The rain hammered against the roof of my car as I stared at the rusted gate ahead. The once proud Monroe Estate sign was barely legible, worn down by years of neglect. The old family house loomed beyond the tangled branches, forgotten, like me. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw this place. Since they betrayed me. My parents, my sister Rachel. All of them had left me for dead when I refused to sign away my grandmother's land, the only thing she'd left in her will. It wasn't just property to me. It was home. But tonight something was wrong. The front gate hung open, swaying in the wind. No lights in the windows, no familiar glow from the porch. My pulse quickened. The old house might have been abandoned, but someone had been here. I killed the engine and stepped out, clutching the small key I hadn't used since I was 21. The cold bit into my skin as I forced the gate open with a groan of rusted metal. As I approached the house, I noticed footprints half washed away by the rain. Fresh. Someone had come through recently. My mind raced, wondering if it was looters or squatters. Or worse. I climbed the creaking steps and tried the door. Locked. My hands trembled as I slid the old key into the lock, praying it still worked. The heavy door groaned open, spilling darkness across the porch. The smell hit me first. Damp wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic. Blood? My stomach twisted as memories came rushing back. Long-forgotten echoes of laughter, arguments, whispered secrets, all haunted these walls. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my grip. Cobwebs clung to the banister like sinister threads of forgotten stories. My boots left wet prints on the dust-caked floor. The house felt wrong. Then I saw it. Muddy boot prints leading deeper into the house. Someone was here. A sudden creak echoed from upstairs. I snapped the flashlight upward, heart pounding. The dim beam barely penetrated the shadows hanging over the second floor. Hello! My voice sounded brittle, too fragile in the silence. Nothing. Just the wind rattling the windows. I forced my feet to move, climbing the worn stairs one step at a time. The air grew colder the higher I went. Every creak of the wood under my boots made my pulse spike. At the top of the stairs, the boot prints veered left, toward my old bedroom. My throat tightened as I followed them, stopping in front of the half-open door. Fingers trembling, I nudged it open with my flashlight. The room was empty, except for a faded, water-damaged photograph pinned to the far wall. My family. Mom, Dad, Rachel, and me. Taken the summer before everything fell apart. Someone had slashed through my face with something sharp, leaving deep gouges in the paper. Suddenly, something cold pressed against my neck. A blade. Don't move! A low voice growled behind me. My mind went blank with terror. In one fluid motion, I drove my elbow back, connecting with flesh. The knife clattered to the floor as I spun around, shoving the intruder into the wall. Stop! He hissed, raising his hands. His hood fell back, revealing a battered, familiar face. Caleb. My breath hitched. Caleb Whitaker. My best friend once, before everything burned down. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, voice sharp despite my trembling hands. Saving your life, he snapped, gasping for breath. They're coming. Before I could respond, a deafening bang echoed through the house, the front door exploding inward. Heavy footsteps thundered across the wooden floor below. Caleb grabbed my wrist, yanking me toward the hall. We have to go. Now. Too stunned to resist, I followed, adrenaline surging through me. He led me down the narrow servant's staircase at the back of the house, every breath ragged and desperate. Who? I gasped as we hit the back porch. Who's after us? He didn't answer. Instead, he shoved me toward the overgrown woods behind the house. Run! We crashed through the tangled underbrush, slipping on mud-slick roots. Behind us, harsh flashlight beams sliced through the stormy darkness. Caleb pulled me down into a shallow ravine, covering my mouth with his muddy hand as the searchlights swept past overhead. My mind reeled, piecing together the fragments of this nightmare. Suddenly, a sharp voice crackled over a distant radio. Sweep the perimeter. She has the drive. My stomach twisted in confusion and dread. Drive? Before I could process what they meant, Caleb yanked me to my feet, his grip bruising. You have it, don't you? He hissed, wild desperation in his eyes. I don't even know what you're talking about. Caleb's jaw clenched, rain pouring down his face. They think you do, and if we don't find it first, we're both dead. We stumbled through the rain-soaked forest, branches clawing at our skin as the distant shouts of our pursuers echoed behind us. My lungs burned, but I pushed on, adrenaline dulling the ache in my legs. Caleb's grip on my wrist was iron-tight, dragging me through the maze of twisted trees like he knew exactly where to go. What the hell is going on? I gasped, struggling to keep up. Who are they? No time, he hissed, scanning the woods like a hunted animal. We need to get to the old service tunnel. The what? Before he could answer, we heard the crack of a twig. Too close. Caleb cursed under his breath and yanked me toward a narrow path, nearly hidden beneath a canopy of dripping branches. The rain intensified, turning the ground into a slick, muddy death trap. Twice I almost fell, saved only by Caleb's vice-like grip. My mind was spinning, stuck on that radio transmission. She has the drive. We burst into a clearing, where a rusted chain-link fence stretched across the perimeter of what used to be an old hunting lodge. Beyond it was a dilapidated utility shack, half swallowed by creeping ivy. Caleb shoved me toward the fence. Climb. I hesitated, still breathless. Where are we going? He didn't answer. He was already scaling the fence with practiced ease. I swallowed my fear and scrambled up after him, landing hard on the other side. This way, he ordered, sprinting toward the old utility shack. The door was padlocked, rusted but solid. Caleb yanked a hunting knife from his boot and jammed it into the lock, twisting with a sharp snap. The door groaned open, revealing a dark, musty interior. Caleb slammed it behind us and barricaded it with a broken metal shelving unit. We'll be safe for now, he muttered. I doubled over, gasping for breath. My soaked clothes clung to my skin, cold and heavy. What is this place? I managed. Maintenance shed from back when the Monroes ran logging operations, he explained, yanking off his soaked jacket. Nobody's been here for years. I sank onto a dusty crate, head spinning. Caleb paced like a caged animal, his eyes darting toward the boarded-up windows. You need to start talking, I demanded. Who are those people? Why were they in my house? And what the hell is this drive they think I have? Caleb finally met my gaze, his expression grim. You don't remember, do you? Remember what? He ran a hand through his soaked hair, clearly debating how much to tell me. It's about your grandmother, he said slowly. She left something behind, something powerful and dangerous. My heart pounded harder. My grandmother? The only thing she left me was a useless plot of land, and the memory hit me like a slap. The wooden jewelry box. My grandmother's old, carved box, left sitting in the attic of the house. I hadn't thought about it in years. Thought it was just sentimental junk. You're telling me they're killing people over that box? I asked, incredulous. It's not the box. Caleb's jaw tightened. It's what's inside it. Before I could respond, the unmistakable sound of breaking branches echoed outside. Caleb was at the window in a flash, peeking through the warped slats. They found us. His voice was ice. Through the back, he ordered, shoving open a trapdoor in the floor. Go. I slid down into the dark tunnel beneath the shack, landing in a shallow stream of rainwater. Caleb followed, pulling the trapdoor shut just as the shed's front door exploded inward. Heavy boots thundered above us. He grabbed my arm and motioned for silence, leading me deeper into the pitch-black tunnel. The air was damp and suffocating, every sound amplified by the narrow walls. Where does this go? I whispered, struggling to keep my breathing steady. Old escape route from the logging days, Caleb replied, barely audible. It leads out near the cliffs. Cliffs? My stomach twisted. You planned this. Before he could answer, a sudden burst of static crackled from Caleb's jacket pocket. I froze as he yanked out a small, battered radio, one I recognized from the pursuers outside. You stole their radio? I hissed. Caleb pressed a finger to his lips and adjusted the frequency. A distorted voice cut through the static. Search perimeter 3. Confirm the asset is secure. Asset? They weren't talking about the drive anymore. They were talking about me. Caleb's expression darkened as the signal faded into static. He stuffed the radio back into his jacket and grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. We need to move. Now. What did they mean by asset? I demanded, panic rising. Not here, he snapped, yanking me down the tunnel faster than before. We finally emerged into the open, cold wind blasting against us as we stumbled onto the jagged cliffs overlooking the stormy ocean below. The black waves churned violently, crashing against the rocks in a relentless rhythm. There. Caleb pointed to a hidden path winding down toward a narrow beach, almost invisible in the darkness. Before we could descend, another voice echoed behind us. Hold it right there. We spun around. A tall, lean woman with piercing eyes stood at the edge of the woods, a handgun raised steadily in her hands. She wore dark tactical gear, soaked but perfectly composed. Behind her, two more armed figures emerged from the shadows, blocking our only escape route. Ava Monroe, the woman said smoothly, her voice cold as steel. You're coming with us. Caleb shifted protectively in front of me. Like hell she is. The woman smiled faintly. You're out of moves. Before I could think, Caleb lunged, grabbing my wrist and dragging me toward the cliff's edge. My breath hitched as we skidded dangerously close to the slippery rock face. Jump! Caleb yelled. I barely had time to scream before the ground vanished beneath me, and we plunged into the freezing, merciless sea below. The icy ocean swallowed us whole, dragging me down into its freezing abyss. My lungs burned as I kicked toward the surface, limbs heavy from the cold. My head broke through the churning waves, and I gasped for air, blinking against the stinging saltwater. Ava! Caleb's voice cut through the storm. He bobbed a few feet away, struggling against the relentless current. I fought the tide, clawing my way toward him. Thunder roared overhead as the rain came down in icy sheets. In the distance, flashlights swept along the cliff's edge, but the mercenaries couldn't see us through the crashing waves. We need to move now, Caleb shouted, pointing toward a distant rocky outcrop barely visible through the fog. There's a cave, if we can make it. I nodded, forcing my frozen limbs to obey. Every stroke felt like swimming through wet concrete, but I pushed forward, letting the current drag me closer to the jagged shore. My fingers scraped against slick rock, and I heaved myself onto a narrow ledge, gasping for air. Caleb followed, hauling himself up beside me, his chest heaving with exertion. We collapsed against the cold, unyielding rock, shivering and soaked. After what felt like an eternity, Caleb forced himself upright and guided me toward a dark crevice hidden beneath the overhang. The wind howled outside, sending icy sprays of seawater crashing against the cliffs. We collapsed inside the shallow cave, shivering uncontrollably. Water dripped from the walls, and the air was damp and cold, but at least we were out of sight for now. For a long time, neither of us spoke. My breath came in ragged gasps, heart pounding from exhaustion and lingering fear. I could still hear the crackling radio from before. Confirm the asset is secure. What did they mean by asset? I finally choked out. Why are they after me? Caleb stared at the ground, his jaw clenched. His face was pale, bruised, and etched with exhaustion. You really don't remember, do you? His voice was hoarse. Remember what? I snapped, frustration burning through the cold. I don't know anything about a drive or a will or... It wasn't just about the land, Caleb interrupted, his eyes blazing. Your grandmother wasn't some harmless old woman. She built Solace Corporation. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. What? She was one of the founders, he continued grimly. Back when the company was just a government research front. But she left. Ran when she realized what they were becoming. My mind reeled. My grandmother, the Eleanor Monroe, had founded the very corporation hunting me? Caleb ran a hand through his damp hair, struggling to keep his voice steady. Before she died, she created something, a failsafe, something that could take Solace Corp down forever. The drive, I whispered, numb. He nodded. She hid it, left clues only you would recognize. My pulse quickened as memories surfaced. My grandmother teaching me old family codes, stories wrapped in riddles, and the carved jewelry box I'd left behind. They need you alive, Caleb said quietly. You're the only one who can unlock it. Before I could respond, faint voices echoed from the cliffs above. The mercenaries had followed us. Caleb shot to his feet, eyes blazing with urgency. We have to move. He grabbed my hand, pulling me deeper into the cave until we hit a narrow tunnel winding deeper into the rock. My heart pounded as we stumbled forward, slipping on wet stone. Suddenly, the faint glow of flashlight beams spilled into the cave's entrance. Boots crunched against the rocky ground. They were coming. We pushed forward, breathless, until the tunnel widened into a vast underground chamber. Seawater surged through its base, creating a hidden tidal pool. And there, half buried in the sand, lay something I hadn't seen in years. My grandmother's old rowboat, still intact, miraculously preserved by the cave's shelter. Get in, Caleb barked, shoving the boat into the water. I scrambled aboard as he pushed us off, grabbing the oars and rowing with desperate strength. The boat rocked violently, seawater sloshing over the sides. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the cave entrance. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks as the mercenaries burst into the chamber, their faces twisted with ruthless determination. Row! Caleb bellowed, grabbing a rusted boat hook and swinging it at the nearest attacker. I rowed with everything I had, muscles screaming with effort. The boat lurched into the open ocean, carried by the tide. Caleb barely managed to leap aboard as another volley of gunfire erupted behind him. We were free, but not for long. A black helicopter rose from beyond the cliffs, its searchlight locking onto us with eerie precision. This isn't over, Caleb muttered, loading a stolen flare gun from the boat's emergency kit. Before I could question him, he aimed at the helicopter's fuel tank and fired. The flare hit dead on, sending a fiery explosion ripping through the dark sky. The helicopter spun out of control, crashing into the waves with a deafening roar. Breathless, we collapsed into the boat as silence fell over the dark, endless ocean. The storm finally began to ease, leaving only the sound of waves lapping against the hull. We drifted in silence for what felt like forever. The boat rocked gently, carrying us farther from the ruined shore and deeper into an uncertain future. You knew, I said quietly, still struggling to process everything. You knew this whole time. Caleb's gaze was unreadable. I had to protect you. By lying. My voice cracked. His expression softened, haunted, tired. You were safer not knowing. Until now. The faint glow of dawn painted the horizon, cold and beautiful. We weren't safe, not yet. But for the first time in years, I felt something like hope. The truth was finally out, and we were still alive. Thanks for watching. What would you have done in Ava's place? Drop a comment and subscribe for more intense stories.